sinners flock to the dark Lord. I said the devil walks the earth, sinners worship that dark Lord. Nice suit, nice tie, expensive shoes. The devil walks the earth, watch the sinners rise. Nice suit, expensive watch, only respected by the sinners. I said the devil walks the earth, watch the sinners rise. Ooh. Nice suit, expensive watch, only respected by the sinners. I said the devil walks the earth, evil only lives on if good men stay silent. Speak out, I said speak out. Stand tall, I said stand tall. The devil walks the earth, watch the sinners gather. Speak out for the good of all mankind.
So this is going to be a bit different. I was planning on making a bigger video on the topic, the subject here, based on what happens if Trump decides to withdraw support for Ukraine. How will that affect things, and how that eventually sets off a chain that draws Europe into the conflict and it escalates a grander war. I figured I was going to have a script to follow and show you things and stuff like that. But now all of a sudden we're at that point where Trump has said that he will pull support from Ukraine. So I figured why not just make the video here now and do it a bit more free form instead of describing this hypothetical future scenario thing. I'll just do it instead of a script, just do it freeform. So that's where we are, and so let's get on with it, right? And of course, it all began with a big disaster in the White House where Trump and J.D. Vance ambushed Zelensky, and that has now resulted in Trump saying he will withdraw support for Ukraine. We'll see if it's actually going to be a thing, or maybe the Ukrainians will come back and get Trump to change his mind, or if Trump will stay with this decision and withhold support for Ukraine. It will have ramifications. Ukraine won't have as stable air defenses around their cities. More Russian drones will reach their targets within the cities. More civilians will die. More infrastructure will be taken out, and more legitimate military targets will be taken out as well. And of course, the United States has provided a lot of Bradleys, infantry fighting vehicles, to Ukraine. They won't receive any more, won't be receiving spare parts and what have you. It's gonna have an impact on the war for sure. And I mean, United States has provided a lot of equipment. And just to highlight some of it, here we have more than 300 Bradleys, 900 M113s, more than 300 armored medical treatment vehicles, 400 Strikers. I mean, it's it's a lot. And if we move down 5,000 Humvees, this is not small amounts of important stuff, right? 12 NASAMS, 2 Patriot batteries, and you have 3,000 Stinger anti-aircraft systems, 10,000 Javelins, 120,000 other anti-armor systems and munitions, 10,000 TOW missiles, anti-tank guided missiles. And then you have other missiles down here. So, I mean, quite obvious, and all the drones as well. Quite obviously, it is a big deal if the United States pulls out and does not provide more ammunition, does not provide spare parts and what have you for all of these vehicles, all of these technical systems, right? It is a big deal. It will affect the war. So what is the danger here? The danger is, and the danger increases without US support, that Russia may have actual breakthroughs in the Ukrainian front line. So far, it's been a slow crawl, this advance of theirs. For instance, if we take a look at the advance from Avdiivka all the way to Pokrovsk, roughly 60 kilometers, that took Russia 14 months. And in those 14 months, they did not conquer an area. The area they conquered was just barely the size of Luxembourg, a tiny, tiny country in the middle of Europe. And if you compare that to Operation Barbarossa, when Germany in 6 months went from Poland all the way to Moscow, and then Operation Bagration, when the Russians a couple of years later launched their offensive, where they went from within Russia all the way to Berlin, basically in 6 months. It's or outside, they entered into Germany in 6 months. So the war here is moving at a snail's pace. This is not blitzkrieg. This is Schneckenkrieg, right? This is not an impressive military campaign, but without US support, Russia could actually have actual real breakthroughs, come in behind the Ukrainians, force large areas of Ukrainian where the Ukrainians are in control to fall back. And this is when we enter the dangerous territory for the rest of Europe. Because if Russia has a number of breakthroughs and they manage to grab a lot of territory in short time, Ukraine may ask for outside help. And France in 2023 hinted that they would consider it, and that they have already in 2024 trained thousands of troops to take part in such an operation. So France has said openly that they would consider this request, and they have trained the units that they think that they can send to Ukraine. They trained for this in 2024. So if Russia has a major breakthrough and pushes Ukraine back significantly in a way that makes Ukraine feel they need outside help, France is more than likely the country that will respond to this and send troops to Ukraine. So does that mean that the French will automatically be used in combat? Not necessarily. I think more than likely foreign troops would be stationed on the border with Belarus to free up all the Ukrainian forces up here so that they can be deployed down to the front line. But if that is not enough, what happens then? More troops, European troops along the Russian border, maybe? So you free up more Ukrainian troops, but then you get close, really close to Kursk and the Kursk incursion, right? And what if that is not enough? What if, for instance, I mean, it's not beyond reason that Trump will begin to trade with Russia. So Russia can ramp up their missile production, their drone production, even armored vehicle production. Then Russia may actually begin to push even deeper into Ukraine. And what happens then? What if at this point, where you have thousands of European troops in Ukraine, what if Ukraine asks for aid on the actual front line? So if the French send troops, then maybe the Polish will, because Poland doesn't want Russia to reach the Polish border, right? You're more than likely going to have UK troops here, German troops, potentially even troops from Scandinavia and the Nordics. If we have a significant significant Russian breakthrough, there is a chance that the European troops will be deployed into direct combat with the Russians within Ukraine. And then we will have a serious problem in the rest of Europe. Not that we should back down from any Ukrainian requests. We should help them if they need help on the front line, without a doubt. But that has ramifications all across Europe. Now, you may argue that all of Europe combined is more than a match for Russia, especially after Russia being so heavily depleted in Ukraine and has shown that its tactics are lacking, its air force is not what you expect, and Western missiles fly straight through Russian air defenses, striking targets all over the place, right? So if all of Europe combines their efforts, what can Russia do? And there's some truth to this, but if Russia can't face Europe militarily, that doesn't mean Russia will not retaliate. I mean, just zoom in here on the Netherlands here, and if we take Amsterdam, take a look at this. Big harbors all over the place, right next to town, right? The city. And take a look. You have oil refineries and all of this. I mean, we've seen what Ukrainian drones can do to areas like this, right? We all have seen the images, what drones can do to industrial sites like this. And this is Amsterdam in the Netherlands. So imagine Russian operatives, they're driving a minivan filled with a couple of drones. They park, I don't know, up here somewhere, and then they fly in with those drones and start hitting targets all over the place. If we have petrochemical transports here coming in, these large ships, one of these ships could carry as much as 30,000 tons of propane. I imagine one of those ships gets hit by a drone and thousands of tons of propane detonates. What, you think Russia can't retaliate if Europe gets involved? Then you have in the middle of Poland, where all the trains go into Ukraine, bringing in Western support, Western supplies. What if Russian operatives strike at these? You don't need missiles to do this. You need operatives with explosives. What if they wait for a civilian train to move along these railroad tracks that are used here to bring in military support, and they blow up the train tracks and force a train to derail full of civilians, right? It's not a case of just rebuilding the tracks. You have to deal with the wreck, and you have to deal with all the dead people on the site. So you've now effectively locked down that railroad for days and weeks. right? We had just a day or two ago here, Gotland Island. It was reported that it was a sabotage attempt that was spotted in the nick of time. Advanced, as it was reported on, a advanced sabotage attempt to deny Gotland and everyone living here to have drinking water. So the water supply was attacked just a day or two ago here on Gotland, with intent to deny the entire island to have drinking water. I mean, these attacks will hit Europe all over the place. More than likely, the moment you have European troops deployed in Ukraine, even if it's only along the border to Belarus, then these attacks will happen. Ports will be hit, railroads will be hit, infrastructure, power supply, water supply, all of it will be hit. And if you begin taking out ports, it's going to be difficult to move things in from the outside world, food, essentials. The same thing if you hit the railroad hubs. It's going to be difficult to move around essentials, food, and what have you. It's going to affect people. And if you start messing with the power supply, it's going to affect hospitals, even if they have their own generators. It's going to affect banks if you hit power supply, if they hit telecommunications and what have you. Like they have been doing up in the Nordics. Been taking out telecom masts and what have you. And they've been here in the Baltic Sea, they famously have been sabotaging the submarine telecom cables moving all across the Baltic Sea. They've been dragging anchors with large ocean-going ships and disrupting the internet connection between the countries up around the Baltic Sea. And that's just a taste. And what it ultimately means in the end, that civilians will die all over Europe due to Russian sabotage, because we have European troops just guarding the border with Belarus. Guarantee it. So what happens if we reach the point where you have French and Polish and German troops actually fighting on the front line? Civilians will die. We're not going to see Russia moving in and conquering Stockholm or taking over Warsaw. They will attack by different means, and people will die. One minivan with just a few drones can strike at Amsterdam and cause tremendous damage. And they can repeat that all over Europe. They're going to disrupt communications. They're going to take down the banks by removing power, by removing internet connections. And it will affect people. People will go broke. People will go hungry. And people will die when trains start to derail. All because, potentially, one should add, because the United States refuses to support Ukraine militarily with equipment. And there is, of course, the very real possibility that Russia will force Belarus to join in on the war if we see French troops on the front line, or Polish or German. Because if Europe gets involved in Ukraine, Russia will probably feel that Kaliningrad is in danger. So more than likely, it wouldn't surprise me if we reach that point that Russia and Belarus try to link up at the Suwalki Gap. And Belarus would probably try and move into Poland and Ukraine to cut the vital railroads leading in through Chelm and other places. At the same time, we will probably see missiles and drones flying in from Belarus towards Warsaw. Because the Western armies, I don't think we're prepared to deal with these swarms of drones and missiles, the saturation that Russia is now engaging in, saturating a target area to overwhelm air defenses. So I think there's a real possibility that Warsaw will be hit much in the same way that we've seen Kyiv over these last 3 years. And the question is, can Poland, and with European support, defend Warsaw from such attacks? So even if most of the drones and missiles get shot down, some will push through the defenses, and you will see civilians killed in Warsaw. I am more or less certain of it, that will be a reality. So, I mean, we're not talking massive invasions. Strategic locations like the Suwalki Gap and maybe railroads close to Belarus leading into Ukraine. But beyond that, we're going to see terror bombings of Warsaw, potentially Gotland, and potentially of Stockholm. And we're going to be seeing scenes like these that we've seen in Ukraine happen in Warsaw, guaranteed in Warsaw if we reach that point. So when people are talking about, a united Europe will squash the Russian military, more than likely, in the end, that's going to be the end result. But until we reach the point where we have defeated the Russians, scenes like this will take place in Poland and other places in Europe. It's not going to be a clean war. Civilians will die. I can guarantee you that civilians will die. And that means people you know, people in your family, co-workers, in your neighborhood, your neighbors. So if you think this is just going to take place in Ukraine, you are dead wrong. You are so wrong. This will not be contained to Ukraine. It will spill into the rest of Europe. So what can you do about it? Well, I'm thinking, when I was playing around with the other video, and then I was thinking, the reason Europe is not directly involved today in the war is to prevent civilian casualties, and also to prevent a nuclear war, but primarily to prevent civilian casualties throughout Europe. It's kind of like during the Winter War, when Sweden supported Finland. Sweden did not officially enter into the war, but deployed a third of the Air Force and 10,000 infantry to help defense. But they did not officially join the war. It was volunteers, because, a third of the Air Force obviously can volunteer and bring planes, pilots, ammunition, fuel, and ground crew without the government and military being involved. But officially, Sweden was not involved. And the reason was to prevent civilian casualties in Sweden, while still trying to help the Finns. So Europe would have to do something similar, would be my guess. And that would mean that Finland would not join in on this endeavor, nor would the Baltic states, and nor would Romania. Hungary and Slovakia wouldn't join in either way, so, nor would Moldova. And the point is, of course, to deny Russia the opportunity to attack these countries, because they are not actively taking part in the hostilities. And this also creates a buffer zone for the countries that are actively supporting Ukraine within Ukraine. All of a sudden, Russia can't launch missiles, they can't launch drones, they can't launch aircraft across Finland or across the Baltic states because they are not actively participating in the war. So this creates essentially a couple of choke points where Russia can act. You have up here out of Murmansk towards Norway, where the Russian Navy will probably try and come around Norway to attack the rest of Europe. But I'm thinking the British and French Navy will face the Russians up here in the North Sea. Russia can come out of the Gulf of Finland and try and do stuff in the Baltic Sea. They can launch attacks from Kaliningrad towards Poland, Germany, and Sweden. I'm thinking Stockholm would be a prime target here in that case, besides Warsaw, due to the fact that, to be honest, Swedish air defenses are not, up to speed. To be perfect, that's not a secret. It is what it is. So Stockholm would probably, along with Gotland and some targets down here, will probably see a lot of missiles incoming. And of course, then you have Belarus, where Russia can move through Belarus to attack Ukraine from the north and continue in towards Poland. So you have these choke points where Russia can act, where they can launch missiles, where they can send aircraft and what have you. So meanwhile, you have the buffer zones of Finland, the Baltics, and Romania, and Hungary, and Slovakia. And then you have the rest of Europe that probably maybe will engage with troops and particularly air power within Ukraine and towards Russia at these choke points. But I mean, this is not going to be an isolated event. If things kick off in Europe, Trump is going to pull all American forces out of Europe, guaranteed. Day one, they're going to be leaving. He doesn't want to end up in a situation where he has to take action against Russia. So all the American forces will be removed from Europe as soon as France or whoever decides to help Ukraine with boots on the ground. And Trump is a greedy bastard and a businessman. He's probably going to sell weapons to Europe, but at an extreme cost. And he's going to be trading with Russia. Russia is going to be able to increase their industrial capacity because they're trading with the United States. And Trump may very well sell weapons to Russia as well, which, could earn a lot of money for the United States military industrial complex. It wouldn't surprise me. And then you have the whole situation with Greenland, with Trump wanting Greenland. Maybe he will demand Greenland in return. Maybe he will actually have troops deployed to Greenland. Remember, they said that they did not rule out military action to gain control of Greenland. And you also have the issue that a lot of European nations rely on American fighter jets, American technology, and American missiles to keep their air power running and operational. So if the United States, just like they did with Ukraine, they feel that the Europeans aren't grateful enough, that they aren't getting paid enough, maybe Trump feels that if he can't get Greenland, if he can't get North Sea oil and gas, then maybe the United States will not help Europe keep their air forces operational. And where are we then in terms of holding Russia at bay and denying Russia striking civilian targets in Poland, in Sweden, and elsewhere? Right? It's, if we reach that point, all because of Trump removing support for Ukraine, and the French in 2023 saying that they would have to consider helping Ukraine if they were asked to. And in 2024, the French trained to send troops to Ukraine, right? It could all escalate to this situation that we're talking about right now. And it's not impossible. It's not even improbable. Maybe not, the chances might not be overwhelming that it happens, but there's still a chance that we will reach this point within a few short years. And that is scary. So we are at a point where things might escalate quickly. Maybe things fizzle out and nothing happens. That's what we in Europe should hope for. That we can contain the fighting to Ukraine. I mean, it's egotistical, I know, but we don't want bombs dropping on our family members, right? We want the war contained in Europe, in Ukraine, and we want to defeat Russia in Ukraine to prevent the war from spreading. But if we are unlucky and this escalates, what we need to do is prepare ourselves today. Because if the shit hits the fan, it's too late. If you run off to the store when the shit hits the fan, so will everyone else, and then you're going to have to fight people for the essentials. You're going to have to fight people to grab hold of food and water. And if the power's out, do you have hard cash on hand, or are you just using your mobile phone and some apps and your credit cards, right? So that is why the Swedish government has provided all Swedish households with this pamphlet or this small booklet in case of crisis or war. I will provide a link to the agency in question that provides us with this pamphlet or booklet, and you can actually download it for free. It says right here, this is Swedish, ladda ner means download. So click the link and you can get this entire pamphlet for free in English. So you don't have to order a physical copy. You can download it for free in English. So we'll provide the link to that, to the English version. And what this does is tell Swedish citizens what to keep at home, what to stockpile, food, water, and essentials to survive for a week on your own without outside assistance, in case of a crisis or in case of war. So you have everything at home, so you don't have to rush off in a panic and fight others to grab the essentials. You have it at home, you can survive a week with your family, and then as society slowly moves into war mode and then can begin to help everyone who is in need of help, you can survive those first couple of days on your own until society can actually come in and provide you with what you need. So I'll show you briefly what's in this brochure, in this booklet. Right, so it's obviously primarily aimed at Swedish citizens, so it includes, what different air alarms, air raid alarms, and what you should listen for and what have you. But it has, beyond that, stuff that you could use, like rudimentary protection, what to think about, where to hide if bombs begin to drop, if there are explosions in your area. And if you go down, you can find home preparedness, water, how to store water, how much you need, and what have you, heat, how you stay warm indoors. I mean, that's a big thing here in the north, with real cold winters. And communication, how you can stay in touch with local authorities, listen in on official radio news and stay updated. Food, what to gather and how to store it and what you should focus on and stuff like that. Currency, keep hard cash at home. toilet, how you stay on top of hygiene. And it's a good read, and I think you should download it and take a look, because you might if the shit hits the fan, you need to be on top of this before stuff gets out of control. And I don't think we should expect to be perfectly honest European armies to have massive successes on the battlefield either, because they're not used to drones. I mean, we've all seen what happens when Russia launches massive mechanized assaults. We've seen Ukraine try the same in Kursk, and what happens when you have prepared defenses with drones. The mechanized units gets wiped out. What Europe could bring to the table is a massive air power superiority, and they could saturate enemy positions with bombs and precision bombing and what have you, and then try and move in with the mechanized units after the fact. But even then, if the air power doesn't deal with the problem, then you will lose a lot of vehicles to drones. So in the end, a combined European army could more than likely force Russia out of Ukraine, but not without great cost. It's going to be a steep learning curve for the European troops if they get deployed to Ukraine, having to deal with drones. Absolutely guaranteed. So we will see huge numbers of lost vehicles and large casualty figures for the European forces, even if they will gain ground and gradually force Russia back if they are deployed to help the Ukrainians. And it will mainly be due to the air power that Europe can provide. But like we said before, it all depends if the United States will help Europe keep those planes in the air. Do we trust Trump or not on that? With that, if Russia begins to lose on the battlefield, or will Trump cut aid to Europe and instead start supporting Russia? I mean, it's. I mean, either way, it's all just equally possible at this point. Do we know who Trump will support? I mean, I guess most of us will assume he will support Putin in the end. But I mean, he's a businessman, so maybe he will try and make as much money as possible from Europe, demanding Greenland, demanding North Sea oil and gas as payment for keeping Europe in the fight. And then there is the threat of nuclear escalation. France has nukes, England, the United Kingdom has nukes, Russia has nukes. Whatever happens, European forces must not enter into Russia proper. Belarus, we may get away with attacking into Belarus. Kaliningrad, not unlikely that Polish and German forces could get away with assaulting and taking over Kaliningrad. But Russia proper, pushing into helping Kursk, for instance, that will not fly. That puts at great risk that Russia will actually respond with a nuclear threat. So European forces will have to focus on fighting within Ukraine. Maybe, if we push it, maybe Poland and Germany can push into Kaliningrad. But that's a great risk as well. So yeah, I mean, each step brings us that much closer to a place where we really don't want to be, and it will affect civilians all over the place in Europe. The main fighting will happen over here, but civilians will die all across Europe if we reach that point. And that is why as many of us as possible have to be prepared for that situation. So basically what you need is to do is gather stockpiles, food and water, talk to relatives if they can take care of your children, because you never know, you might get drafted, or you might be forced to help out with the emergencies when the explosions happen. Make sure that relatives have access to your financial situation. If you are off doing whatever you have to do, then maybe your relatives will have to take care of your kids, and they may have to have access to your finances. So you should have those documents ready. This is no joke. If the shit really hits the fan, worst case scenario, United States will never support Ukraine again, and then we may see French troops in Ukraine, and then the ball is rolling, and not much can stop it. Hopefully, it won't come to it. But I think it's better to be safe than sorry, and we should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. So yeah, some thoughts of mine concerning the current situation. It may change tomorrow because no one knows what Trump is up to. Maybe the Ukrainians are offering a deal to Trump that he will accept, and nothing will happen, and we will slowly see Russia being ground to dust in Ukraine. But it's equally possible that the United States will stop altogether to support Ukraine, or they will, down the line, a month or two from now or a year from now, cut support once more. You just don't know with Trump. And since we don't know, since anything can happen, we really need to prepare for the worst. And to think that European militaries will just stomp Russia and nothing will happen to the civilians in Western Europe, that's just naive. Yes, Russia may not be able to retaliate militarily in the way they want against Europe, but they will find other ways to attack us. They will make sure that oil refineries blow up. They will make sure that ports and harbors are disabled. They will attack railroads, derail trains with civilians. It's going to be terror, government-sanctioned, government-funded terrorism aimed at European civilians and aimed at strategical locations all across Europe. That is a very real future that we might face, and we should prepare for it. We should prepare for the worst and hope for the best. Anything else is naive.